I literally haven't slept, I probably slept 10 hours in the past week. And then last night I ended up just staying up late. Me and Neil were talking and I'm like, "Oh, I'm getting really tired." And I'm thinking in my head and he pulls out his phone and it was 5 in the morning. And I'm like, "Oh my God, how did we
Oh my
just
God.
talk to 5 in the morning
Oh,
without
you guys are
realizing
kind of
it?"
cute though, that you still talk and talk
That's what
about
Lexi goes,
everything.
"Oh, it's like in the beginning when time just flies by or whatever."
Welcome to Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism Podcast. We are Jen, Kim, Rachel, and Jamie. Take a seat at our table as we share with hope, humor, and honesty.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the third episode of our Autism Resources Uncovered series. We have Tabs with us tonight, which we're very excited.
Hello.
Tabs.
Just gonna
Hello.
keep inviting Tabs to come on and
Every 2 weeks.
She can't say no. So for this episode, we are going to be kind of talking about government programs and mainly waivers for the US kind of portion of it. Jen's going to talk a little bit about what the equivalent is or kind of how Canada functions, because obviously their whole healthcare system is different than ours. And I just want to put a disclaimer out there that none of us are experts on this. We've only experienced what we've experienced. And a very big part of why we're doing this episode is because it seems like a lot of information is gatekept, or people don't know that other states have really amazing resources and waiver opportunities that other states don't. So the waivers we're mainly going to be talking about are HCBS waivers, which are home and community-based services. And they are targeted to people who need basically long-term services and supports. Like all of our kids at this table, they all have diagnoses that will last their whole lifetime. They will always need some sort of support. Not that they'll always get it, but these are things that they need. And a lot of time that's called LTSS, which is long-term services and supports. But the HCBS waiver programs are a fee-for-service programs, meaning the provider is paid for each service the patient receives, and they require individuals to meet criteria set by the state on a base of need. And so simply a waiver is a program that allows people who otherwise would need institutionalization or wouldn't be able to function out in the community or be in their home without help. So the whole point of these waivers is to kind of waive what you regularly would need to receive Medicaid and these other services because of a disability. And there's different types of waivers. Some are for more medical needs. We're mainly going to be talking about autism and intellectual disabilities today. But if you or your child or someone in your life has another lifelong medical condition, please look up your state and look up the waiver list that we will link below this episode. If you just go to medicaid.gov, you can find a waiver list that tells you what states have waivers and what waivers are in the states. And each state has different waivers. Not all states even have them, and different stipulations and stuff that they have. I'm in Colorado, and basically for us, the benefits helps my child stay in the home and receive help from us and kind of supplement where a typical family can function, we can't function. And then our waivers in Colorado, I know for sure, have extra programs and resources. They don't just simply waive the criteria you need to meet to get Medicaid. But I thought we would kind of start by having Jen kind of talk about Canada and how the system works for her in BC, Vancouver.
Thanks, James. Ours is pretty cut and dry, actually. Once you receive your autism diagnosis, if your child is 6 and under, you automatically receive a $22,000 grant. Of course, that's not money that ever crosses, people are like, oh, the money. No, it goes into, it's like an account, and you transfer it out to providers. And that changes when they go into school and they turn 6. That 22,000 gets reduced to 6,000 because the government assumes the school system's going to pick up those therapies, which you all know they don't. Kaya never saw a speech therapist. She never saw an occupational therapist. So it's assumed that they will get those services in school, which they don't. But that's in BC. And then you have to get from a certain provider. It's called the RASP list, which is the Registry of Autism Service Providers. So the specific therapist like Jackie is on the RASP list. Chelsea Cheeseburger was on the RASP list. If they're not on the list,
You
they
were
have to put-
waiting for a homeschool provider to get that
Yes.
certification at one point, weren't you?
yeah, because they have to be on that specific list in order to be covered through that autism funding. It does have to be certain providers. The government's been throwing around changing the program drastically and sort of honing in and kind of dictating where the service providers can only use. And they got a lot of pushback from the community. So I think they've kind of pulled back a little on that for now. But like state to state, it changes province to province. But here for Kaya, she's homeschooled. So the benefit of that is they will pay for OT and speech on top of her homeschooling, because that is something that should be provided in public school. So that is kind of a nice benefit. And then on top of that, they support it. Yeah. And then on top of that, I have an extended health benefit coverage with my work. So, I'm fortunate I can get a little bit of extra speech a year for her on top of, the funding. But it's kind of like, one bank has to empty before you can touch this one. And then this has to drain before you can access this one, which is fine. It's great. It doesn't matter. And then nothing's carried over year to year. So if you don't use the funding in that period, it just goes away and it kind of restarts the following year. I was mentioned real quick, Saskatchewan. We have some friends over in Saskatchewan. There's for children under 6, straight 8,000 across the board. When they turn 6, it goes down to 6,000 like BC. I don't know of anything else in detail. These were other provinces, were just quick Google searches. It looks like Ontario has done a drastic turnaround. Their funding was horrible, but it looks like they've started going by levels now, and the amount each child will get by the needs that they require. But I was reading that they just doubled their budget to $720 million. So they've bravely expanded their programs in Ontario, which makes sense for such a huge province. So yeah, that's just kind of Canada in a nutshell. I do think it's kind of nice where it's just straight across the board, and then there's not all these levels of things you have to access. It's like this age bracket, you can kind of spend within this age bracket, you spend within this. So what you have to work with, and then anything else on top of it that you have.
It's also nice that it starts at diagnosis. That's cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right away from then till 6.
And do you have to like when you got diagnosed, did someone tell you that you qualify for that, or was it
So
kind of
that-
like
No, literally, I think I wrote about it early on, and I actually found the folder today because I keep all her stuff in one spot. It was a red folder. They handed me this folder, a red folder, and it was a RASP label on the front. And they handed it to me, and off I went. I had no idea. I didn't even know what RASP. I didn't even know what it meant.
Mhm.
I was just blindly off you go. They just hand you this thing. Recommend ABA, and away you go. But what I will say, like every single province that I looked into, it's the same thing as it is here. The wait lists are so extensive. So that's great. You have, 22,000 to spend a year, which it's a fair amount. It's not when you're in full-time therapy, which, that goes really quickly. But I always say I'm grateful that we get that, because some people get nothing. So I am thankful for the services we do have here. They have ranked BC the best province in the country right now currently for services, which is interesting. But again, the wait lists everywhere are extensive. So it's just a shortage, the turnover's huge, trying to find someone consecutively. Yeah. So yeah, I think ours is a little bit smoother here than, you guys, the simplicity of it.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of go around and talk about what's in each of our states. And I will say 4 out of the 5 states we're going to be talking about here are some of the best in the country. As like we've all kind of been told, like Massachusetts really good for services, Arizona's really good for services, Minnesota, Colorado, and it's still incredibly complex and crazy. And the reason we're really wanting to do this episode is because just a lot of this information, like I was saying before, is really gatekept, and we've all kind of found out about all these things in like weird random ways. No one directly came up to me and was like, hey, this is everything that you could possibly qualify for. You should talk to this person. Like, it was parents who did that for me. And so I think we just want to put this out there and be like, hey, just look into what your state offers, or if you're really struggling. I mean, a lot of people, I'm not saying do it because the cost of living here is insane, but a lot of people move to like my state specifically because of the services and just the overall vibe and acceptance of people with disabilities. So we just want to put information out there. So the rest of us are going to kind of talk a little bit about like what we do or don't do. And then we've had some people send in some recordings talking about their states. or areas. And it's not every state or every area, but we're just putting this out there for everyone. Rach, do you want to talk about, I feel like Rach probably knows the most about her waiver because she's had to go through a lot, and you've looked into different waivers and moving around and stuff like that too. So
Yeah, sure. We live, as many people know, in Minnesota, but like the ladies have talked about, Minnesota services are governed by or sort of kept by the county. So I specifically live in Washington County, which is outside of the Twin City Metro, meaning that we have lots of clinics here and lots of providers. It's not like a rural county in northern Minnesota. We do have lots of population to sort of offset that access. So I'm not saying that there's doors flying open at every one of those centers, but rather that they're here. So are the people. Anyhow, so we live in Washington County. Minnesota offers 6 waivers, which I'll get into in a moment, but it's important to know that there are not wait lists for waivers in Minnesota. Rather, that there's a process that you have to accomplish to access them. And all of that has to be done before the rest of the stuff expires for you to qualify and then gain access. And then you have to re-qualify every year, and parts of this sort of adjust and change as your kids' skills do, but also as chronological age and chronological maturity would have an age bracket sort of, I don't know how to say besides that, like a 12-year-old is going to be capable on paper of something that a 2-year-old isn't. So the scoring system is different, as your child ages. For us in Minnesota, the steps are the same for everyone in the sense that you have to contact your county. The sentence that you can say to get action immediately is, I need to have a min choice assessment, or say something like, I need to find out about waivered services. Once you do that, you should get sent through to the state medical review team, often called the SMRT process here. And that is like a separate panel that reads all of your child's files and determines whether or not they are deemed disabled in the state of Minnesota. It is assumed that once you are through this state medical review team, that you are also qualified for medical assistance, which is a whole other animal and like a whole other service to navigate. But once both of those things are done, then you're qualified to complete the assessment for waivers. And there is one assessment for your child's age group, regardless of disability, regardless of outcome of which waiver they'd go to. So this worksheet sort of tracks everything, generates a score, which shows which criteria you meet, and then how many dollars go into the bucket for you to spend within that budget, if that makes sense. So, I mean, there's a lot of people and a lot of chiefs and a lot of different processes all kind of coming together in Minnesota to make it happen. But once you get that assessment done, you are given a caseworker or a case manager and the budget. So it follows a fiscal year. It starts when you get your number, and then you have to select a payer agency and a fiscal planner agency. Once you do that, then you have the choice as the parent and caregiver to spend the money out of the bucket, so long as everything can be proven and kind of brought back to that report. That's sort of a mess, but it's 5 steps of MA, SMRT, assessment, hire the payers, write the plan, and engage the waiver. So it's a 6-stepper. The waivers there's 6 of them. I'm just going to be brief with 4 because they are less likely to be used by our community, and 2 that I can talk a little bit more at length about. A CAC waiver, or Community Alternative Care Waiver, is for chronically ill kids or folks, not just children, or medically fragile people who need a level of care provided by a hospital. For our friends that have this, autism is only one of the children's diagnoses. So there's more to the constellation of disability that makes them fragile in one way or another, that makes sort of this the appropriate fit for them. Another one that's sort of like that is brain injury waiver, which it has to do with someone who acquires a brain injury, not is born with a brain difference, or even in Seeley's case with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, that's under the developmental delays rather than an injury. The other two waivers that come into play if the person that you care for is older is the AC waiver, which is alternative care. This is for people over 65. And one similar to that is called an elderly waiver. And those two sort of have differences in what the person's needs are and what level of care they would need to be at. But the two waivers that are most widely used by our peers are either the CADI waiver or the DD waiver. CADI in Minnesota is a waiver for folks with disabilities who would require the level of care provided in a hospital in order to stay home. And I'll outline how we use our CADI waiver in a moment. But the DD waivers are for developmental disabilities. This is for folks with a developmental disability or related condition who need the level of care provided in an intermediate care facility rather than a hospital. And this person would have a full-scale IQ of 70 or less. Both the DD waiver and the CADI waivers offer a very similar set of services, including the ability to charge paid parent to that waiver, which is a privilege that we have in Minnesota. I know that that's not accessible everywhere, but before I tell you how we use our budget and sort of how we came to that, there are also grants that people should look into if waiver isn't something that you qualify for. In Minnesota, that would be called a consumer support grant. You'd call your county for that information too, and it would kind of come through the SMRT process that you'd qualify for that. For us, we exhausted that benefit too soon, and so we got switched from a grant to the CADI waiver. Okay, deep breath. Seeley is utilizing a waiver called CADI, which is the Community Access for Disability Inclusion waiver. This is the most widely used among her peers and is available and governed by each person's particular county, but also in accordance with their assessment results. Within the CADI program, there's two options. One is called CDCS, which is the consumer directed and most used. This gives you a budget, sort of that bucket of money that's qualified from the score, so to speak. The other is called straight CADI, and that gives approvals based on not a budget, but rather a level of need. So if Seeley had the straight waiver, the only reason Seeley would have a straight waiver is if she was ever placed outside of our home, because it's a budgetless, so to speak, way to bill for her needs, because intermediate care facilities, residential treatments, and all the other things require so many more dollars than our bucket could hold otherwise. At the beginning, when Seeley was younger, she qualified for $45,000 to be used annually at our discretion because we had the consumer directed waiver. Currently, she is given an extension rate, which extends the budget up to 30% more annually, which is around $60,000. We utilize that by exhausting the paid parent budget, which in Minnesota across the whole state, it's $39,000. And then the rest of those line items that we use, again, are supported by her assessment. So we have like $700 paying to reimburse laundry fees that are different for my family than they would be for a typical. We have housekeeping services because my daughter needs 24/7 care. So I don't have the bandwidth to do that. So it's like written within our family support line items. We also pay for respite services, sensory equipment, classes and camps, and more. Even if there was like a deep cleaning or Seeley had a lot of aggression or whatever, I could, at my own discretion, have someone come in, help us with stuff, and then bill for that. But it would all have to be in the plan and approved before the date of service. Again, just to be super clear about the shift from CADI CDCS to CADI straight, and because our listeners follow us or subscribe at Flanaville or have listened for a long time, using that foster placement that we have, or the hospitalization, or these different levels of services where Seeley jumps from a level of care to an additional level, All of those are gateways where people have asked if we have a waiver or would help us access them. They would all bill to a straight waiver if she went out of home placement in any, like even for 30 days. So you can make one switch a year from one waiver to another, but you cannot switch back and forth. You can't like have a budget and then decide that you want a bigger fence or a kitchen in your basement and your kid has this level of need and switch to the straight waiver and then go backwards. Like it's not easy to shift from one to another. Jane, one of your questions was, are you aware of any other programs or assistance that our state offers? Yes. Check with your county if your child has a mental health diagnosis. All of the stuff that I've just discussed is waivers having to do with autism, but an entire gateway of services and resources could open up if your child is dealing with mental health. Sealy, for instance, has a children's mental health caseworker who helps me hold all of the spokes of all of these things that I've just discussed and all of these different people. She helps me to do intake paperwork. She body doubles me so that I can accomplish stuff without this guilt or brain fog or like the mess of the mom load, you know? She also, because I have allowed her to be in our life at that like level to hold all the things together with me, she's able to do intakes on her own. She's able to do like referrals for me because we've trusted her at that level. She knows all the things, she has all the documents, and she can support the weight of all of these processes with me. And it's valuable. I know that a lot of families don't utilize that service, but it's worth it for us. The other thing is that each county in Minnesota has a crisis team to call, or maybe they go multiple counties, across multiples. It's like a step between calling the doctor and calling the police is where I have it in my mind. That takes forever for them to get there. They don't necessarily arrive to de-escalate, but they are another gateway to all of these services because they want to connect you with a waiver. They want to connect you with a social worker. They want to like connect networks of access for you, which I have found really valuable, even though it feels like another way to be super vulnerable. Lastly, stick with it. So in Minnesota, call and call and call so that you know where your paperwork is and your child's paperwork is at each desk between all of these different loops and hoops that it has to jump through. The squeaky wheel gets the worm. I went through this process after going through a dinner where all these moms sort of put their hands on me and told me what to do. So I knew that I could nurse the process very quickly. I got it done. Tell them. It is like, if you don't help me, the little baby casket will be on your shoulders because nobody helped my kid fast enough and she ran in the street. I mean, I said that to these people at each and every level to get action. It is like, it can be done quickly. It could also take a year because your bandwidth is less, but date everything, keep the originals, fax it so that you have proof that you sent it, like take notes so that when shit hits the fans, you can see where it went wrong and what time so that you can restart the process from there. I also feel like don't avoid the hard answers when you're dealing with the assessor. Just say it all. Like everything's a gateway to help. You're not like selling your kid out, Tell them the hardest stuff that happens shamelessly. The answers are generating points that become a gateway to dollars in the budget. If you aren't specific enough in that assessment, you won't be able to get approved services within criteria to meet them. You won't get PCA services. You wouldn't get incontinence supplies if you're not like really answering each of those questions like we've talked about. Educate yourself. Oh, this is a super good tip and they really, really helped me. There's a podcast called Champions of Home Care Podcast. It's by the company that we use as our payer, which is called ACRA. So again, the podcast is called Champions of Home Care Podcast by ACRA. And they only have like a dozen episodes or so, but they give you all the language and they sort of read the brochure of services to you. And it's really helped me to understand what I did. And just don't pussyfoot around any of it. Be super direct. Like just be direct. Oh my God, I still didn't go over this. Jaime, if you want to cut this, cut this. I just wanted to give a sense of the catalog of the DD waiver because the few line items that we utilize our budget for isn't necessarily what everybody would. So know this, in the DD specifically, you can do 24-hour emergency assistance. You can have adult day services and adult day service, bath services. You can use assistive technology, caregiver living expenses, case management, and case management aid. You can help with chore and daily activities, activities of daily living, community residential services, consumer directed supports that give a person a flexibility or responsibility to direct their own stuff. So it kind of guides through the process. Crisis respite, day support services, employment development, employment exploration, employment support, environmental accessibility adaptations, extended personal care assistance, family residential services, family training and counseling, home delivery meals, homemaker fees, independent living skills and therapies, individualized home supports, including 3 different options of support, integrated community supports, night supervision, I'm almost done, positive support services, pre-vocational services, respite, specialized services, transitional services, and transportation. And it's important to think of all of those as a huge bucket of needs to be worded right based on your need to then be billed to the budget. It's pretty incredible the amount of support you can pick and choose from, validate, and get approved. It's incredible.
Just what you're saying too about making copies of everything, that's
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
just here we have to do like a disability determination, kind of like what Rachel was talking about, to like validate that your child or the person needing the waiver has a disability. But we had to like submit this whole packet of stuff, and of course like you can upload it on this thing, and of course it's like, you know, we can practically do so many things on so many sites, but any government run site's like so picky.
Yeah.
And
You
like
should
it
send it
didn't
Morse
upload
code.
properly. And
Yeah.
like luckily I had the hard copy because I had to scan the hard copy in to do it. But like we didn't know for a while that did not work because, you know, there wasn't like a final like, yes,
Mhm.
we've got it or anything like that. You still don't get it. So we had to like make copies of that, put it in an envelope, drop it off at some random office and hope it got the right. Anyway, I just really thought about that. I'm like, yes, make copies of everything.
We had to resubmit our MA application 3 times. And each and every time I would send the cover letter of me receiving that it did send. I'm like, hey, listen, mofo, at 1,436 hours, I sent this thing.
These programs are still run by government agencies. Just remember, I'm sure our resident lawyer will be able to speak on that. But well,
Yeah.
we have tabs here, and the cool thing about tabs, although I don't, part of it's probably not cool for tabs, is that she went from Arizona to Montana. So tabs, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Arizona and now your
Yeah.
experience in Montana?
Arizona has great support and services, I'll say. So Arizona doesn't technically have what they call a waiver, but it's Arizona long-term care is what they call it. So you have to qualify for DDD, which is disability, which is the same process as the waiver, where someone comes to your house, they do a point system, they make sure your kid or adult, if you're getting adult services, meets their random nobody knows point system to make sure that their disability qualifies them for disability. So you have to do the DDD application and all text application, 2 separate applications. People don't know that you can submit these at exactly the same time. They tell you to wait until you get approved for DDD, but no, do it at the same time, people, because they run on 2 different systems. And once you get approved for DDD and you get approved for Altex, which is Arizona long-term care, you get insurance through the state of Arizona, not Medicaid. It's a Arizona run insurance system, which is awesome. So for us, for both of our kids, we had private insurance and we had state insurance for our kids. So we could get speech therapy, occupational therapy, if you do ABA, all through that, and whatever one didn't catch, the other one catch on our insurance generally. They
Yeah.
also provide respite, which there's not, providers for respite, but if you can get a family member approved for respite to be a respite provider, it's not that hard of a process to do that. You have to do a background check, you have to take some CPR classes, some other classes, and then they can be your paid respite provider. So if grandma and grandpa or aunt and uncle are already watching your kids, that qualifies. They also during COVID had parent habilitation hours that they would provide to parents during COVID. And I think since I moved, they have allowed that to continue. So they're still paying, you have some dollars up to a certain amount, depending on your kiddo, that you can get as a paid provider for, and don't quote me on that, but that's what I've heard around. So Arizona, I mean, we did it really fast according to all the people that dealt with us, but it's because I had my packet together, made all the copies. I did the same thing, Jamie. I had to go down to some rando office, drop that stuff off. They say you can submit it other ways, but I mean, really, no, you can't. And we did both applications at exactly the same time, so it sped up the process. Thumbs up to Arizona. They're doing a good job. One thing I will say, that a tip I got from parents in Arizona was, when you are answering the questions for your kids to qualify for DDD or one of these, like if you have a person come to your house who's asking you, can your kids put on their shoes? Can they use the bathroom? If they can't do it 100% of the time, the answer is no. It's no. Otherwise, it's 0 points or 1 point or whatever their crazy mystery point system is. I don't know. But there's no middle ground of like yes or no. You just, and they, yeah, sometimes. There's no sometimes, because that's not gonna help you in this situation. And it's so confusing at the beginning because you always want to like elevate and give props to the skills that your kid took so hard, such a long time to learn. But in these circumstances, it's like, no, they can't use the bathroom 100% of the time. No, they can't tie their shoes or whatever 100% of the time. So that was really, really, really helpful tip to me. Arizona, love it. Good job, Arizona, for all the supports.
Yay.
They also in Arizona have ESA, I think. It is, if they have a ton of charter schools, they have private autism schools, they have programming for teenagers, different schools that you can send your kid to outside of the public school. And in Arizona, if you choose to pull your kid from public school, they give you the dollars that they would pay to the public school to pay for your charter school, or, you know, whatever programming fits for your kid. You can apply to use those dollars to pay for a separate charter school or private school that fits your kid better. And you can, if you homeschool, you can also get, you know, resources, swings, like all kinds of things for homeschooling through that same program in Arizona. And I believe they opened it up recently to all kids, not just kids with disabilities in Arizona. So if you pull your kid from public school and they need to go somewhere else or want to go somewhere else, you can get those dollars, and also their siblings can, in theory. That's what I've heard. When we were there, it was for kiddos who had disabilities. If the public school could not provide the resources for them, then you got these dollars to go to wherever you want. So again, Arizona's awesome. I highly recommend, if you know what you're doing, navigating all the systems. Now, this lovely, beautiful state of Montana is a black hole of death for services. There's not a freaking thing in this state. It is horrible. We have 2 waivers. The 0208 waiver, which has, I've heard, between 7 and 12-year long wait list.
I have a friend who was on that for 21 years, the wait list.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, a fantasy of services. It's a pretend service, in my opinion. So the 0208, to qualify for 0208, it's the same thing. You have to submit your application. This is the stupidest thing about the 0208, which makes me infuriated. It makes me so mad. So 0208 eligibility for anyone age 8 or older, you have to have documentation of an IQ of approximately 70 or below. So for our kiddos who have autism but do not have an intellectual disability with an IQ of less than 70, they wouldn't qualify for the waiver if they're over 8 years old. So my kid doesn't need services after they turn 8 if they don't also have an intellectual disability. Makes no sense.
And you're not getting it before that because there's a longer wait list than there is time in those years.
Yeah. Yes. So you have to, and this is the other thing, you have to have a neuropsych eval or psychological eval within the 3 years that says that you have an IQ of less than 70. So when I was talking to the people about this, I was like, but my kiddo doesn't have an intellectual disability. He has autism. They're not the same thing. They're two actual separate diagnoses, and they both need services. So anyway, that's the 0208 waiver. It's a fantasy for most people in this state. And I don't know who actually gets it here. A lot of people
It's as
like,
though there's a certain number given, and that because you don't age out of them, the spots that come available are because someone passed away, presumably. Like that's the rate at which they're allowing people off of the wait list. People
Yeah.
have moved off the wait list or they've passed on. Like that's
and
what it is.
a lot of people move out of the state. Like if you have a
Right.
kiddo who has significant medical necessity, cerebral palsy, or something
Mhm.
like that, there's not resources on this waiver or any waiver in the state. The other waiver is the Montana Medicaid Big Sky waiver, which is to keep people out of institutions or higher level of care, but the qualifications are basically that you need community-based support. So it's to keep you out of community-based support, but the qualifications are that you need community-based support. So
Mhm.
again, a waiver that makes no absolute sense in this state. So the additional services you can get is STEP that I found. STEP is a program that helps you navigate these waivers, fill out the forms. They can help you with IEP stuff, blah, blah, blah. I did not find it a resource for us, I'll say. But they will give you information for the waivers, applying for the waivers. The other thing with STEP also is that after you're 8 to qualify, you have to have an IQ of 70 or lower. So again, you cannot get these services for someone who has any needs outside of meeting those requirements. As far as I know, this is what I know about Montana. We have zero community support for our family in the state of Montana. We have been
What
on a wait list for speech therapy for my nonverbal daughter. We did have speech therapy, then we had to get referred to a new provider. I think we're going on like 8 months of waiting,
Mhm.
being on wait
What
list.
you do have in Montana, though, Tabs, is like, I can't recall the girl's name, but remember that friend of yours who had a center in Missoula because there was such a need? And then they developed this program and worked with parents and developed this program. And, like, there is grassroots stuff there because parents have had to work together to develop stuff. But and in large part, that's adult services and adult availability and like short term stuff. We looked a lot into Montana. And as Celie's parents, it's not possible for us to leave Minnesota and be okay in Montana until she's 22 and we can access some of the like adult programming that would all be private pay access. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's just asinine.
What Jen was saying, it's the same theory that a lot of the support falls back on the public school. Like speech therapy, occupational therapy is expected that the public school provide those resources. And so you don't need this waiver outside support because the public school is supposed to be providing it, which we all know that our kiddos get 30 minutes of speech therapy a week or, whatever their IEP says, but it's very limited on the actual amount of services that they can get in the
Mhm.
public school because like the speech therapist is only at that elementary 1 day a week or 2 days a week or whatever it is for all the kids who need speech therapy. So I mean, I'm talking pretty sternly about Montana, but it is a freaking mind-blowing place for a place that I feel like could provide a lot of support and grassroots type stuff. So I will say that I live in a place where that has less resources than like what Missoula would have, or Missoula's pretty liberal and pretty
Bozeman.
and Bozeman, yeah. I mean, they have more like centers and more
Therapists, more therapists in
advocacy,
general.
more therapies, yeah. Um, so I will put that out there. But as far as waivers go, or dollars or money to get these supports in Montana, there is not help.
Do
Just
you
gonna say.
remember when we were talking about Montana for you like all this time ago and we were like, no, we must not be able to find the website.
Yeah.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, and
oh, it looks-
I thought I was like missing something. I'm like, what? Where is the information? Where
No.
is the information? There is no information to give because there's no information to provide. And I thought Arizona was hard to navigate when I first started jumping in that, and then I'm like, freaking Arizona, thumbs up to you, to that state.
Yeah.
Like you guys are doing great.
user friendly.
Great. I mean, it's still
Turns
like
out.
this is still the same hassle that all parents have to go through when you're filling out the billion documents and the caseworkers coming, and it's overwhelming and all of the things. But what there it's there. The support is there if you can make it through that process. It's there for sure. So that's my soapbox on Montana. It's just terrible. Just
So
terrible.
do your kids qualify through their disability to have medical assistance? And if there was providers, would you be able to secure services through that? Like
No.
if you lived in no, that's what I thought too. Yeah.
No.
When I called Montana, this was about 2.5 years ago before we decided to stay in the county and move to the house that we did. They said, oh, don't worry. All kids qualify under 5 years old for 20 hours of ABA. And I said, oh, that's peculiar. All kids, period. She said, ABA therapy. I was like, oh, is that applied behavioral? And like, I'm like, are you talking about the same ABA? Well, then there is one provider in Bozeman.
No.
I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad that you're willing to give this fake service to all the people of Montana, but there's one person who does it. Thank you. Goodbye. Like,
well,
this
and
again is nothing.
0 to 3, I mean, you get early intervention no matter what, right? I mean, 0 to 3 is the window where they have to provide early intervention to all the kids. But then 3 here, it kind of you get shuffled off to the public school or preschool, which is, as we know, 2.5 hours per day. So, I mean, I'm really bitter about it because I feel like it's a forgotten population here. And the dollars aren't even, it's not even like a consideration for the stuff to be moving and shifting. Like they tried to pass a 0208 increase in provider pay, I think last year. Nope. And I don't know what the rate is, but it's something not livable for people who want to help our kids. And that fell dead. So it makes me sad. And if anyone knows any additional information, please send it my way. But I've scoured the internet at this point. So from what I know, my kids don't qualify. And even Nora, I mean, we've never had her IQ tested, but I don't think she would qualify, even being nonverbal, for the fantasy waiver, as I call it, 0208 fantasy waiver.
Yeah.
That's it, people. If you're choosing between Arizona and Montana, I recommend Arizona.
There's pretty skies though in Montana.
Yeah,
Vacation in the big sky country. Vacation there.
The good news is the pace of life is a lot slower here in Montana, so it fits my kids well, the nature and all of that as a substitute.
I would say Mother Nature is Nora's OT for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're making it work, but the government is not helping us at all.
And what about you, Kimmy? I know Alyssa hasn't been on a waiver program, but is there other government assistance or programs in the state that you guys use?
So the autism waivers did not really come out until Alyssa didn't qualify, because up until I think 2 years ago, maybe, they only had a waiver program for children up to 9 years old, which I think provides like in-house supports and a variety of stuff. I don't really know what happens to them when they turn 10. I'm guessing that's maybe when they age out of a lot of the ABA centers and stuff like that. Maybe I'm not really sure about that. And now they do have 3 different waivers, as Jaime pointed out to me, for adults, which they did not have 3 years ago. So, and I think they basically it's basically intensive service waiver, which is, who individuals that need intensive behavioral supports and, help in the home and, 24-hour care. They have like community-based supports, and they have one that kind of goes like in the middle, which I'm assuming maybe Alyssa may be qualified for that. I'm gonna end up looking into that. I don't really know. But they have a lot of things here. It's like a waiver, but then like what they do is like they provide like Alyssa's dance class, for example, that is funded by the Department of Developmental Disabilities, where the waivers go through. I feel like it's just misleading. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like this is part of it, which it's great that they do this, don't get me wrong, but it's like they provide a lot of community-based activities. So one of them is Alyssa's dance class. So we pay $20 for that. And they pick up the rest, they pick up the costume and different stuff like that. And they do have a lot of like activities that they do, but like it's not really appropriate for Alyssa. Like, no, I'm not going to send her off with strangers to go into Boston to see a play. Like, it's great for some individuals that are like a little bit more verbal and a little bit more less severe than her. But like, what are you going to do if she freaks out on the bus? Like, they're not going to, one thing was to go on a boat ride. I'm like, hell no, would I send my child on a boat? And you can't
For
go
your
on them.
sake.
You can't go. Only the adults can go. And I'm sure it's appropriate for a lot of people that kind of fall into that middle range. It's not really appropriate for Alyssa. It's like, I wish they would be like, okay, well, here's discounted tickets for this play in Boston that you guys could take her to at a discounted rate. That would be great. Cause
That
like,
makes
I would
more sense.
definitely
Yeah.
do that. But and every once in a while, like last year, they're like, oh, they gave away 4 tickets to like a water park. But like, you have to see the email in like real time. Cause they only had like 50 packs, which I saw it and I was like, I'll take those, thank you. But it's stuff like that. So like it's like saying that they provide these supports to the individuals, but it's like it's not exactly how that stuff works. But also I don't know exactly how it works. And they do a lot of like there's art classes, there's music therapy, but everything's like on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. So like if you work or your child's in like Alyssa's in a day hab. So her day hab is paid for through her Mass Health. So the state insurance, everything Alyssa's gotten has been through her state insurance. So speech therapy, occupational therapy that I talked about earlier in this series that she did like outside of the school stuff, that's all paid for Mass Health. Granted, you have to find a provider that takes the Mass Health, and not everybody, like the place that I found while Alyssa was adult, they don't take Mass Health. So like she wouldn't be able to go there for speech therapy, but like you can find places that do take it. So inter-school is paid for through Mass Health, or her day hab rather, and it's supposed to be therapeutic, but it's kind of just more supervision for her, a place for her to go during the day and stuff like that. And then they have the PCA program, which is paid for through Mass Health, which is just like, it stands for personal care assistant. Like Alyssa gets she gets 8 hours a week, and it's like somebody who can come and kind of help with like bathing her. She gets like a little bit for a couple different things. She gets like 30 minutes for this, 15 minutes for that. Like she gets very minimal hours. It's designed for all disabilities, not just autism. So like maybe you have somebody in a wheelchair, maybe you have somebody who like needs to be fed, maybe you have somebody who's in, not toilet trained and they need to be changed. So like they would get like a lot more hours than like somebody like Alyssa. And then there's another program called adult foster care, which we have looked into, and I think I'm going to revisit again. So you can do that once they turn 18. But what it is like one parent has to be the caregiver, one parent becomes the guardian. So like both people can't be the guardian under this. So Neil became her guardian. And the plan was for me to do the caregiver, but we didn't really follow through. They came out to the house and they wanted us to like fix some things and change some things. And we were kind of like, we'll revisit this at a later time. But basically that's kind of like paying you to have your kid at home. And there's like 2 ranges, which I'm assuming the money part has changed, but who knows? And it's either you get 25 a day or 50 a day. At the time, I believe we would have got the 50 a day. I'm not so sure now, because it's like that fine line with her of like, it's not as strict as the Mass Health program, the PCA program, where like everything has to be physical, but it's just kind of like how much supervision she needs, how much help she needs, and they kind of come and determine that. But I mean, 50 times 30 compared to 25 times 30, that's like a very big difference. But you cannot get the PCA program and the adult foster care program. You can only do one or the other. But then you have workers in your house. They have to come out to the house once a month. And some people say like it's like you kind of like not lose the rights to your child, but like I don't know, kind of that stuff scares me. I don't know. But then other people I've talked to like said that's not true. So we'll probably revisit that at another time. So that's an option that they have. where you would get a little more than what we get for the PCA program. And obviously she is able to get Social Security because she is determined disabled. And here in Massachusetts, or I mean, it could have changed because God only knows. It used to be you had to do the determination every 3 years. And then once you're an adult, usually once you're declared disabled as an adult, it kind of like stays. You don't have to keep redoing all the stuff. But the adult determination is like a pretty intensive process. It takes like almost a year. It's just a lot of like paperwork and stuff like that, and doctor stuff and, all that good stuff. And then she does there's 3 tiers of Social Security. We get the middle one. She gets like $600 a month. So it's not, it's something. So, and that's basically like because she can't work. So she gets that money to, live and pay towards her expenses and whatever else. So those are some of the things that they have. But it's like people were saying earlier, like there's things available, but you have to really know how to navigate and and you have to know what you need. Like I can't just be like, hey, give me that waiver. Sounds great. They're going to be like, well, what do you need it for? Like, what's supports you need in your house? Like, it's not like the child waiver where you're like, they come out and assess and like they determine what you need. You kind of have to like figure out what you need them to help you with. So it's like, that's kind of tricky. I'm pretty sure I was told that she's also supposed to get a stipend every year through DDS, which she's never gotten. I'm like, well, can I get that retroactive, please?
Yeah, with interest.
It's only a couple hundred a year. Like it's just not a ton. They do have respite services. Again, that's something we've never looked into because like, I'm not going to leave her with strangers and go on a vacation and be like, we'll be back in a week. You know what I mean? Like that would just be traumatizing to her, but it is available for people that, we have family, she has siblings, we have other options. So, luckily for us that like, we don't have to do something like that, but they do have that available. And obviously you have to like apply for that and, all that stuff. And I mean, she used to get respite, but you could use the respite or you could use the money. You could do it. I mean, it wasn't a ton. It ended up being a couple hundred a year, but then they cut the respite program completely out. So like, I don't know if
All
that
these
could be
things you
back.
got to figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze, like,
Yeah.
and over the course of all these years and time, it's like, maybe one of them maybe it's worth looking into now. It just always feels like it's shifting.
I know like there also is like a program that you can like get say like a room added to your house or a ramp or like something. I don't know the criteria for it, but like if you were to sell your house, you have to pay that money back. So like, I'm like, I'll take an addition, please. But obviously it's not that, but I don't know, like, if somebody needed a sensory room or they needed, something like
Right.
therapeutic, I think there is, but it's like you have to really be able to figure out how to navigate it and then know what agency to go through. And it's just a lot of legwork and a lot of like, I see Rachel, she spends hours and days on end calling people and sending stuff back and forth. It's like, I work full time when I can't do that. Like
I mean, it is like a full-time job outside of caregiving to maintain the level of services that Sealy needs to keep access to. It truly is constant management of it.
Yeah. And because they didn't have the waiver program when she was younger, everything that she's needed has usually been covered by Mass Health. Or like sometimes like we've gotten small grants, like we got a grant to get her iPad and her Pro to go when that came out. They had some money. I used to have a lady that worked with us. She was like kind of like a caseworker, like, but a liaison between 2 agencies. And because Alyssa got a slot from the Department of Developmental Disabilities, which every adult gets a slot who has a disability, but like it's a lot harder to get a slot as a child, but she was able to get a slot. So she had some access to stuff and we got like a video monitor for when she first started having seizures. But the lady was like, came to the house and I was like, oh, I wish we had could get a monitor. And she goes, I think they have a grant right now. You can apply. She's always having me apply for stuff, but like, I wouldn't know how to do that on my own.
Yeah.
So we got like the monitor for that and stuff like that. But it's just,
I feel like if you don't have someone helping you or like parents who've already been through it,
mm-hmm.
like giving you the inside scoop there's
Yeah.
the information for how to navigate this stuff is nowhere. I mean, it's
Or
not,
like,
it's
you
not
don't know. Well, I didn't know there was extra money, right? And
right.
she goes, oh, it's the end of the year. We can get this for you because there's like that money has to be used, or they
Yeah.
like it can't carry
Use
over
it
to
or
the
lose
next
it.
year.
Yeah.
Right. So then she's like having me apply, and I'm like, okay, like, and I don't know. It's kind of like what Jamie was saying. It's like hard to be like aggressive about some of this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like you're like,
Yeah.
oh, help me. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, I don't know. It's
And you're
just,
freaking worn out. That's the other thing too. It's
well,
like you
that's the
don't,
other thing.
yeah.
And then you
They
put on
want you to be
hold.
worn out. They're wearing you
Yeah.
down because they.
Yeah, you put on hold, and then it's like, oh no, this person, and then they're gonna email you back, and I don't know. I really should probably look into some of the stuff. It's really just exhausting.
That's kind of where I was. I was telling Rach earlier when I was talking to her about this stuff. It's like when I first learned about this stuff, it was before we had a proper diagnosis. So a medical diagnosis, I should say. So I couldn't do it yet. And then once we went through all the diagnosis process and like just getting to school and the IEP thing, I was just like worn down, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I should have probably, but I didn't have it in me at that
Mhm.
moment of time to
Mhm.
like go through everything. And I feel like that's for a lot of people.
Yep.
It almost gets to the point where it's like, is this even worth it? Like,
Mhm.
it's just a lot. So I'm going to run through Colorado kind of quickly. I only have my experience. I know from where we are. I know some people have had amazing experiences with our waiver program. I know people who have lost their waivers. So it's all over the place. I have a friend whose son, I think definitely should qualify and didn't qualify. And they did another program we have here, fortunately, where you can buy into Medicaid. So she can access some of the things, some of the great services and programs that Colorado can offer through that. It's to everyone's experience. If you live in Colorado or you're thinking about moving to Colorado, feel free to contact me, and I'll give you some of the ins and outs and hints and tips I've been given. But my son's a child, so I mostly know about the children's type stuff. I will say for developmental disabilities, I believe there's only one adult waiver. There are several other adult waivers for different things, but just specifically for this category. And I had been told at one point that it's easier to get onto that if your child is on one of the children waivers. And what we were told, at least for the waiver we're on, that there is not a wait list. It is just by who they determine need it. I'm pretty sure for the adult waivers there are wait lists and longer waits and processes to get on them. So one of the biggest tips I've been told is to get on a waiver while they're young, and it's easier to transfer to an adult waiver. So there are 4 children's waivers. I had been told a couple years ago that they were thinking about adding another one, or there was a process. I don't know what's going on that. Currently listed on the Colorado.gov like Medicaid site, there's 4 listed. My son is on the Children's Extensive Support Waiver, and it's called the CES waiver. The cool thing about Colorado, and I know some other states have something similar, I know California does, is kind of by county, but ours covers a couple counties. They're called community boards. So your community board is in charge of helping people in your area who have disabilities or who have children with disabilities get on programs, find resources, find different things. Like they're just there to support you through whatever you need. And so you kind of link up with them, and you can say like, oh, I'd like to know about waivers, and they'll take you through that process, and they'll kind of hook you up with like an enrollment caseworker, someone who helps you enroll into a waiver, and they'll kind of help you figure out what waiver fits best for your situation, and they'll start getting on that process with you. I don't know if this is across the state, but I know ours, while we were in the process of trying to get our waiver, we were able to go on this community outreach program, which is for people who are either on wait lists or who are in the process of getting on a waiver, but they don't have that waiver yet. So that program actually helped get us funding to help pay for my son's therapy while we were waiting.
That is so cool. This
Yeah.
like
That is
bridge
awesome.
service.
Yeah.
I think
Wow.
I want to say like there was a limit of like $3,000 or $4,000 a year. This was back in 2020, so I guess not that long ago, but in my brain that don't sleep, feels like forever ago. But like all we had to do was we had to like prove that he needed his therapy, and then I had to make time logs, and then it went to a committee, and the committee could approve it or not approve it. Ours was always approved, and so that was really great because it was like a tool while you're waiting. And we ran into a bunch of bumps with some of our paperwork, and I talked about like some stuff didn't go the right place or wasn't received correctly, and we were waiting for stuff in the mail that magically never came, all that kind of stuff. So it was nice to be on something that was helpful through this, like it's our county and another county together have this program. So that was the cool thing about the community where they just kind of tell you, and everyone was really helpful. Some people weren't as knowledgeable. We've had some caseworkers that are like, just like trying to get through the jobs. And then we've had some people that are amazing. And, you know, sometimes it's that when your person's on vacation and the person filling in, you're like, oh, wait, what? Can you?
I was just
What do
going
you
to say that. I love when a person is in their second or third position
Yes.
because then they know all these other legs of the network. You know, they're like, here's the way through.
So we are on this waiver called the CES waiver. And basically how it works is we have so much money we can spend, and we work with our caseworker, and our caseworker really helps allocate what we want to use the waiver for. We can't use everything it offers, and we can't, you know, like, so it's divided up, and it's kind of like you've got to use it for certain things. And I will say we got onto our waiver in 2020. So the process to enroll and stuff might be different because there was a lot of like, okay, we're not doing this part. We're not, you know, like, so some things were easier for us, some things were harder. I will say we haven't had to have someone in our home until this last year is when they required, because that was usually what you had to do. You had to have someone come in your home and go over all the paperwork and stuff with you there and kind of evaluate your child. Just not, the evaluation's done off of what you're saying, but they want to see your child. And ours had, everything had been over Zoom and everything until this last year. And I was like, oh, now we have to have a person in our home, which is always awkward. But our caseworker is really cool. So it was great. So some things that the waiver we have, we don't use all these things, can help you with outside of waiving the salary cap and stuff for Medicaid. You can get adaptive therapeutic and recreational equipment, assistive technology, community connector, which is getting your child out in the community, hippotherapy, home accessibility modifications and adaptations, homemaker, massage therapy, movement therapy, primary caregiver education. So like if I were to go to like a conference or something and I'm being educated on how to take care of my son or about my son's disability, they could possibly cover that. I would have to get that like approved.
Mm-hmm.
Respite, specialized medical equipment, supplies, vehicle adaptations, and like different youth kind of programs. Also, so you have a caseworker through community board and they kind of help you get on to waiver. And then they're also the person who, our caseworker has to check in with us once a quarter. And then every year we have to do a yearly assessment, and they kind of just ask you the same questions every year. And a lot of like, no, this hasn't changed, or this changed a little bit, or this has gotten harder because he's gotten older, all that kind of stuff. We had to do a disability determination to get Medicaid. So it's all that crazy complicated stuff. And we have to basically reapply for Medicaid every year for him, even though we have the waiver. And this is actually kind of a new thing, and it's just all complicated, but just a lot of paperwork. So
Yeah.
I gotta do it. And the great thing about also the community board is they kind of help you. So, you know, our waiver doesn't exactly provide like speech or OT or anything like that, but they will tell you, I could go to my case manager and be like, hey, we're trying to find OT therapists that will take the Medicaid, and she'll give you a list and they'll kind of help you for things. Another thing it helps with a little bit is Jesse's swim. There's a cap on how much they'll help with swim for some reason. Someone up there doesn't think that swim is necessary for people on the spectrum, swim lessons, when it obviously is. So they do cover like so many of his swim lessons a year, cool things like that. So it's all a process. It's been good for us so far. We currently have a really great caseworker, and I really appreciate that. Each of our waivers have a different life cycle. So how often you need to like reassess and all that is different from waiver to waiver.
And then lastly, we have the parent CNA program as well. You don't have to be on a waiver for that. You can buy into Medicaid, become a parent CNA, and be paired through a home health agency to care for your child. There's a lot that goes into that. Like you do have to be trained as a CNA for like with a 4 to 6 week course, I believe most of them are. And there has to be an assessment by the home health agency to see if your child qualifies for needing a parent CNA, and then they also tell you how many hours you qualify for to assist with your child. So that's another really cool thing that a lot of people talk about, that you can kind of get paid as a parent to care for your child, but that does come with needing to become a certified nursing aide. And so it's a little daunting, but they really help you through the program and tell you everything you need to know, basically, and help you figure out how to do the board test and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's a little bit about Colorado. If you want to look into it, you can just go to colorado.gov and search for waivers and stuff like that. And we'll link all this stuff, the description of this episode. And yeah. So now we're really excited. We had a few friends send in some recordings of how waivers or what the system's like in their state. So, you know, if you live in one of these states, this can be helpful. If you're thinking about moving because you're looking for more resources, I feel like this can be helpful, give you a little idea of like what different places offer. And obviously there's a lot more states. We're only covering very few here, but I think it's good to know what everyone has. So anyway, I will let them get to it. First off, we have Sarah Rudder. We've actually had her on the podcast before, so make sure you go back and check out that episode. She writes on a blog called Adventures with Harper Elaine, and you can follow that on Facebook.
Hello, my name is Sarah Rudder, and I live in Columbus, Ohio with my husband and our 10-year-old daughter, Harper. Harper has a diagnosis of autism. In Ohio, there are 3 different types of waivers that I know of. There is a level 1 waiver, an individual options waiver, and a self waiver. The level 1 waiver is for people who do not need a lot of paid staff to support the needs of the individual and is common for children that are still living with their parents. The IO, or individual options waiver, is for individuals that need more help, and most adults with disabilities have this waiver. And then the self waiver is for individuals who are able to manage and be in charge of some of their own services. I'm not sure about the IO or the self waivers, but the level 1 waiver does have a waitlist and determination process. Harper is currently on a level 1 waiver and has been for the past 6 months. We got connected with our county very early on. When Harper was 2, she was enrolled in Help Me Grow, which is a birth to 3 early intervention program. And then once she turned 3, she was connected with a service coordinator at our county's Board of Developmental Disabilities, and immediately put on a wait list for the waiver. When we first were on the list with the county, it was strictly just a list in the order that you were added. A few years ago, there was an initiative to fix the list, and now it is more of a needs-based process with eligibility meetings and determinations that are made to see where you fall on the list. Harper is currently on a level 1 waiver, so I know most about the details of this one. The waiver has a limited amount of money that can be spent each year. For children, the limit is a little over $41,000 per year. This also includes a Medicaid card for Harper. The money can be used for a variety of things, from transportation, respite, goods and services, and lots more. We use most of Harper's money to pay providers to help with Harper. My parents actually help us a lot with before and after school care, and if we want to go out on the weekends or travel. And now that we have the waiver, they were able to become her paid providers. So they now get an hourly pay when they are watching her. We can also use the money for adapted equipment, home modifications, technology, also services like swim lessons or Zoom memberships, along with a lot more that I haven't yet explored. Before we had the waiver, while we were waiting, Harper did qualify for some other funding from the county that covered the cost of her outside therapies and a limited number of hours of ABA per week. And once she is an adult, she will then transfer over to one of the IO waivers that has a more open-ended financial limit along with her Medicaid and Social Security. A little advice for Ohio families: if you aren't on the waiting list with your county board to get a waiver, get in touch with them and get on it as soon as possible. If you already are on the waiting list, reach out to your service coordinator often to see what you need to do to speed up the process. Also, when talking with your service coordinator, it's not a time to brag about everything your child can do. Share your hardest moments, all of them. Elopement, self-injury, aggression. property destruction, incontinence, all of it. They need to know how hard it really can be and how much you need the help. We have been so fortunate with everything the waiver has helped us with, and would love that for every other family that needs it.
And now we have our friend Ryan Lefevers, who has also been on the podcast before. Check out his page. It's called My Heroes Raising Boys on the Spectrum, and you can follow him on Facebook. And he's going to give us some information on California.
My name is Ryan, and I live in California. I am the father of 2 autistic boys, ages 8 and 5. They are both nonverbal. However, my youngest says a lot of words, but is really not conversational yet. We have quite a few waiver programs in California, but I'm going to focus on what we utilize. I am by no means an expert, but this is what our experience is. In our state, each county has a regional center. The regional center helps to provide services and support to people with special needs. Our regional center evaluated our children to determine if they were eligible for services. For children ages 1 through 3, they provide early intervention services. After the age of 3, we, the parents, are to seek out therapies on our own. But the regional center still supports children that meet the requirements by offering annual individual program plans, as well as providing respite services and reimbursement for some social activities like baseball and horseback riding. There are more services, but these are what my children qualified for. Depending on the results of your child's autism evaluation, the regional center will determine if your child is eligible for a disability waiver. If they receive a disability waiver, then they automatically qualify to receive Medi-Cal benefits. Medi-Cal will help cover doctor's appointments and some private therapies such as speech. Once you apply and your child is approved for Medi-Cal, you can then apply for another program called In-Home Support Services, also known as IHSS. IHSS can provide a person to offer care assistance to those who qualify, or you, the parent, can apply to be your child's care provider. And the IHSS program will pay you to provide care to your child. I know there are other waivers our state offers, but this is what we utilize and are familiar with. We hope this helps someone in California starting their journey.
Now we have our sweet friend Kelsey from Kentucky, and you'll hear it in her amazing accent. You can find her on Facebook as a Squeaky Wheel Mama, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the waivers in Kentucky.
Hey everyone, my name is Kelsey and I live in Kentucky. I have 2 kids living with disabilities that are on waivers. My oldest, Waylon, is about to be 6, and my middle child, Amelia, is about to be 3. Waylon has an autism diagnosis and is on the HCB or Home and Community-Based waiver and is on the wait list for the Michelle P. waiver. Amelia is about to be 3. She is also on the Home and Community-Based waiver and waitlisted for Michelle P. waiver. When we first applied to get the kids on the waiver program, we knew that there was a really long wait for the Michelle P, but that is kind of our end-all be-all when it comes to waivers. It's the Mac Daddy. But the Home and Community-Based waiver, it's actually pretty hard for individuals with autism to be approved for. Now it's meant more for physical disability, so we're really lucky that my son was able to be placed on it. The Michelle P. waiver, we were told, would have about an 8-year wait when he first got on it. It's been 2 years now, and as of this past week, he is number 5,942 on the list, so still got quite a ways to go on that one. My daughter has been on the wait list for about a year now, and she is number 6,834, so that shows you the need here in Kentucky. When he first got placed on the waiver, they were only opening spots up twice a year, and they are opening spots up, I think, once a month now. They've allocated some more funding to get through those spots a little quicker, but even at the pace it's been, it'll be at least 4 or 5 years before either of them come off that wait list. So kind of the differences in those: home and community-based waivers can pay for a caregiver. The agency we use does allow me to be the paid caregiver for my son through his waiver, which is great considering it is the main reason why I am not working in healthcare, which is my field as an RN. The big differences between the HCB and the Michelle P. waivers are that Michelle P. waivers do more for adults as far as like supported employment, community living, behavioral supports. It just can do more. There are a few other waivers that are available here. The supported community living or SCL waiver is another one that's common. There is acquired brain injury waivers, but that, of course, that doesn't really apply to autism unless you have other diagnoses that go along with that. Both of these waivers do cover environmental modifications, but I've not been able to successfully get any of those environmental modifications covered. They wouldn't cover the fence in our backyard for safety. They won't cover adaptive steps for my daughter who has low muscle tone due to a genetic disorder. They would cover a ramp, but not adaptive steps. It's kind of like with most things that when you're mild, you don't have as much access to the things that you need, because I do want her to be able to use steps, and I do think that they should help with that, or help with railing. But that's kind of part of my soapbox. I'm very lucky that other mamas let me know what this weight was like, so I knew to apply as soon as possible, because I want them to have access to the Michelle P. waiver for pre-vocational skills and supported employment when they're adults. I've also been really lucky in that as a nurse, I have began working with an agency that provides services for SCL and Michelle P. waiver services. They do community access and supported employment. The organization I work with is called Amazing Opportunities Kentucky, and the things that I love about them are that they are completely individualized. They are doing this because it is their heart's work, and that's the kind of people that they want to bring on board to support individuals. So I'm helping them because I'm training people to give these services that waivers provide in a way that I would want it done for my kids, but they're also helping me understand it as I go. So if you know somebody that works in the industry, or there's an agency that provides services, or if you don't know if there is, just look and ask, because a lot of times these people are doing it because it is their heart's work. And that's been the case for me with Amazing Opportunities Kentucky. And if you are in Kentucky and you're listening to this, reach out to them because they're great. If they provided services for kids my age or on their waivers, then I would definitely go with them. But I'm thankful for what we have, but hoping that we get some more moving forward. I always think it can be improved, and we can do a little better. Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. Thanks.
Next, we have a recording from Wendy Anderson. She's a motivational speaker. She also has a Facebook page you can follow called Redefine Normal with Wendy Anderson. She's extra awesome because she sent in information about 2 states for us.
Hello, my name is Wendy Anderson, and I live in Iowa. I have a 15-year-old son with a rare genetic disorder, tuberous sclerosis, epilepsy, autism, and another variety of diagnoses. Our state does offer waiver programs for individuals. There isn't one specifically for autism and developmental disabilities. As we're talking right now, there are currently like 7 or 8 different waivers that an individual can be on. They are, however, the state is going through a complete revamping of the waivers and taking all of these waivers and narrowing it down into 3 waivers. So there will be a child waiver, an adult waiver, and an elderly waiver. So with that, the idea behind redoing all of this is they're also going to have increased assessments, so that instead of certain waivers having certain programs, that with these assessments, the individuals will get the services that they need. So the hope with this waiver redesign is that the individuals will be able to get exactly what they need. For instance, my son is on the brain injury waiver because he does have tumors in his brain and non-cancerous tumors in his brain. And so we have access to respite and SCL, which is supported community living, so we can have a provider work with him on life skills. There are a variety of other benefits that he would be eligible for more after he turns 18. But for right now, those are the resources that we really use as a family. As far as a wait list, I actually just found out that they are working on the applications that came in from January of 2019. So this is September, almost October of 2024. So the wait list is a couple of years. It's hopeful that with this waiver redesign and they're going through all the applications and everything, that it will actually clean up the list a little bit. And so hopefully that will make everything, a few years faster in order for someone to be able to get onto it. There is a program called Medicaid for kids with special needs. It has a higher Medicaid threshold, but also then helps to provide some additional services, getting the individual on Medicaid and getting some help and support through that. In Iowa, there is a program called the Iowa Autism Support Program, or ASP, with the Regional Autism Assistance Program. What that program does is it provides funding for ABA services for children under 14 who meet the requirements. And basically, one of the largest requirements with this program is that the family's insurance does not cover ABA. So if whatever insurance program the family is on does not cover ABA services, this program will do that. Currently, the limit is that it would basically cover about 2 years of therapy. They are looking to expand that service, expand the time frame, expand the dollar amount, and expand it also to other research-based programs, other therapy programs. In addition to that, I just am not sure when that is going to happen. So I am hopeful that as the state is doing the waiver redesign, that this will be able to open up and allow more individuals to access these services. I live in Iowa, and I do a lot of work with individuals in the state of Nebraska. So I wanted to hop in and talk about the Nebraska waiver system too. So the state of Nebraska does offer multiple different waiver programs. It was just announced earlier this year that they are working to eliminate the wait lists. Now, this is most likely going to take a couple of years in order to get organized to be able to eliminate the wait list, but they are working on it. The last I had heard, they were looking at a 7 to 8 year wait to get on a waiver program. So pouring more funding into this definitely could help. One of the new waivers that they did release and launch was the Nebraska Family Support Waiver. That waiver, I believe, was providing like $10,000 a year for respite, assistive technology, child day habilitation, community integration, family mentoring. So a variety of programs like that for an individual to qualify for that $10,000. $10,000 isn't a lot, but it can definitely help. Nebraska also has the Comprehensive Developmental Disabilities Waiver, which is really the waiver that everyone is wanting to get on, because that's the comprehensive waiver that would help with all of the skills, pre-vocational, residential, respite, all of those things as they grow throughout their life. There is a DD waiver that provides some respite and some support also through that. They used to have, so if you get on the websites and things, you'll see a Nebraska Autism Support Waiver. That waiver, it says, was terminated because it was actually never funded. And so it's not there. Nebraska has also just expanded their Kate Beckett waiver program. So in order to apply for that, you do have to call the Medicaid office itself. That is not an application that can be done online. You need to contact Medicaid in order to do that program. But those are as far as the waivers are. If anyone has physicians or they've done any work with like Monroe Meyer Institute or Boys Town or Children's, I would highly recommend contacting their social work departments to help with completing these applications. Many of them can be done online, but one needs to be done on person, or not in person, but on paper. And so it can be very confusing to fill out this waiver information in these applications. And so that will help, and they're very helpful in walking individuals through this. So another program that can be available or that is available is the Nebraska Lifespan Respite Network. And so through this program, the individuals who run it are fantastic, but through this program, it is a set amount of funding. I'm not sure how much they give each family, but you could use this funding for a variety of things. So I know many of them have connected with like swimming lessons. So you can pay for swimming lessons, you can pay for classes at the Rose Theater or a zoo membership. There's just a variety of ways that this funding can be used. And so you can look that up on the Nebraska Lifespan Respite Network. Like I said, I do not live in this state, so I don't have any children that are in the program. I just know many families that do. I would just highly, as I said earlier, advise you to ask somebody to assist you in filling out these applications. But I'm hopeful that Nebraska will be providing greater services to our families soon.
We want to give a huge thank you to Sarah, Ryan, Kelsey, and Wendy for sending in those clips and telling us about the various states. And
if your state or area provides something, don't be afraid to go after it. The worst thing you can hear is no. And if you think the no is unfounded, then keep trying. Appeal, keep trying. And there are people in like every state who have this down, who want to help. There's moms
like the
out
ARC
there.
and PACER and like there's services.
There's services, and there's also like just like veteran moms, or the lady I learned a lot for works for a home care company, and she just knows the program because here basically Medicaid pays the home care company to pay people to provide respite, community connector. So it's a process. So those people know it really well. And this lady's just like, I want people to know about this. So she's just spewing out information. So get on like message boards, get on Facebook and just say, hey, can anyone help me with this? It's so confusing and complicated. And just remember, like, it's all about what are your toughest days like, looking at your life. And again, we get so used to being moms. We do this and this for our kids all the time. And you kind of lose that perspective that like your kids get to certain ages or things that you shouldn't be doing that for them anymore. And it's okay to like validate that and say, okay, I need help. I need someone, I need a respite. I'm exhausted. How can I access respite? And can my state help me pay someone to fulfill that for me? Or if you need a communication device, like all sorts of different things, look into waivers and programs and then also look into grants. But yeah, just a place to start.
I want to say one more thing about Montana. There is the Montana Empowerment Center, which is that navigation system in Montana to help parents figure out this stuff that could not figure out. But if you're not in the city that I live in, maybe there's something in your city that provides something. So that's for all over the state of Montana. They help with IEPs and 504s and all that jazz. So,
and remember, if Tabs can't figure it out, don't
feel bad that you can.
If you know something I don't know,
she's past the bar, and this is more complicated. But I just keep fighting the fight. It's so hard and it's so easy to give up.
They don't make it easy. It's not you. The system is broken to try and figure this stuff out. It's not you at all.
And ever changing.
Yeah, and you're tired and you're worn out, and if there is a resource for someone to give you a hand, for sure. Keep asking the questions. That's the best tool, I think. Just ask all the things.
Make those same calls every 2 years, because what is not available at 9 might be available at 11, and what isn't available at 21 might be available at 26. You just like things change so rapidly, and what our kids qualify for on these charts that nobody gets to see might just open up when you didn't even notice,
Or it could just continuously expire when your child reaches that age.
Right.
Like that's what happens to us. So
what I like about this episode, and we talked about this when Diane was on, was like it's good knowing other states have this kind of stuff, or what other people do, or how the programs work in other states. So when you are advocating or you are asking questions, you can say, why can't we do this and why can they do it?
Right.
And how's this improving their area? For me, like more than anything, it comes down to like our kids and the fact that they can do things, and that if we help them and if we supply resources to them, they can reach potential in their own way. We got to start where we can. So
You can both utilize a system and be of value. You know, like the
Mhm.
piece that you wrote, James, today about having a chance and giving a chance and seeing another way. I mean, it's just so, I wish people could get it.
yeah, like in our area, in our state, it cultivates an environment where you're supporting those things. So we have like
Mhm.
ice cream shops and coffee places that specifically give employment to people with disabilities. And it's like, yeah, those people are going to need assistance for their whole life, but that doesn't mean that they can't also contribute somehow and do more than just sit somewhere.
Right.
Anyway, I'm not going to go on. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you for everyone who sent in information. We'll catch you guys next time for No Res. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism podcast. If you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. And if you'd like to support us, you can become a subscriber. Just check out the description of this episode. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram for more content, and we'll see you next time.